Happening right now, where is the Maryland resident mistakenly deported to El Salvador? It is the big question on the day of a big meeting between President Donald Trump and his Salvadoran counterpart at the White House. Then caught, cuffed, and in custody. We're learning more about the man accused of setting fire to the Pennsylvania governor's mansion. Our CBS News team's learning more from police about what the plans of the accused man were. Plus, go time for Gail. Did you see it? A king-size space launch with a capsule full of queens. We are wearing some Blue Origin blue here today. I'm Reed Cowan. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Let's launch. Back to that in just a minute, but let's begin with the night of the White House, where the presidential push for deportations meets the Salvadoran president taking U.S. deportation flights into his country. So we're talking about President Bukele of El Salvador. You know, since March, his country has accepted more than 200 Venezuelan deportees into that Salvadoran maximum security gang prison. And among them, this man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. There's his photo. Maryland resident, Salvadoran citizen who had an immigration court order to prevent his deportation back to his native country. So the U.S. Supreme Court has called for his return to the United States. But listen to what was said at the White House from both leaders about whether that could actually happen.
The Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to ask for anyone to get him back?
And what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0.
In our favor?
In our favor, against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time. Well, no version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked President Bukele, can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm suppose you're not suggesting that I smuggle terrorists into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him?
How can I return him, he says. So let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, based on what we heard, it doesn't sound like high confidence Kilmar Abrego Garcia will be coming back to the United States.
Right. You heard not only from Stephen Miller there in the White House, but also the president and the Secretary of State and the Attorney General. And they all were singing from the same hymnal, basically saying that they don't believe that they are required to bring him back to the United States, even though he may have been sent in error. And if he were to be returned to the United States by the president of El Salvador, who was sitting right there, they said they would simply turn around and send him right back. They said he will not live here in the United States with his wife and child, both American citizens, again. And for the president of El Salvador's part, he was equally forceful. He said that he is not in the habit of releasing terrorists from the infamous prison where Abrego Garcia is being held right now. And he said there's no point in him sending him to the U.S. if he is as dangerous as the White House says. Keep in mind that administration officials have not provided any proof that he is dangerous or that he's a human trafficker, as they allege. They say that they have information that they have not shown to the public that indicates that this man, who is a construction worker, a union member, is actually quite dangerous and a member of MS-13.
Nancy, this is also the president's first meeting of many with world leaders to negotiate and talk about tariffs. Did the tariff agenda come up today in this particular meeting?
Not in that pool spray, as we call it, that you just showed, where the president and his El Salvador counterpart were taking questions from reporters. But earlier in the day, I did have a chance to speak to Kevin Hassett, one of the president's top economic advisors, about what we've been hearing from businesses around the U.S., particularly businesses that import their goods from China and are suddenly facing these massive tariffs on Chinese goods, and saying they don't think that they can last very long financially in this environment. Take a listen to what he had to say about that.
There are thousands of small and medium-sized American businesses that rely on Chinese exports. How is the White House recommending that they stay afloat if they suddenly have to pay 145% more to get their goods out of port?
The Secretary of Commerce in particular has a massive team of people, and also the Small Business Administrator, that are taking calls of small businesses, understanding their concerns, and thinking about how best to address them, including by finding other suppliers that are not on the current list that China is on.
They say that they have tried to move their production out of China, but that's a process that takes 6 months, maybe a year. What do they do until then?
It depends on which product, and that's why there are different experts helping the people.
So you heard him say that the Small Business Administration and the Department of Commerce are hearing these complaints. They're trying to figure out what to do. We have reached out to the SBA. No details yet on what exactly they will do to help these companies that have been telling us that really they can't survive very long at all under this current tariff regime.
CBS News Chief White House Correspondent Nancy Cordes, great to talk to you. We hope to see you back here on CBS News 24/7 a little bit later this week. So let's turn now to CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman. Katrina, moments ago, we heard the Salvadoran president talk about this case. He said that Mr. Abrego Garcia likely couldn't be found to be sent back. What's the readout there from that meeting?
Reed, as you and Nancy were just talking about, at the moment, it is not looking promising for Mr. Abrego Garcia's return, but this is in spite of a very firm order from the district court judge last Friday, Reed, that the administration, the government, take steps to return Mr. Abrego Garcia to the United States. On Friday, she told the government that they needed to give her daily status reports about Mr. Abrego Garcia's whereabouts, what steps they had taken to bring him back, and what steps they would be taking to bring him back. We have now seen a very public statement from President Trump that they are not even trying to bring Mr. Abrego Garcia back to the United States, and from President Bukele that he doesn't feel that it's his responsibility either. There's supposed to be a hearing tomorrow in this case, Reed, where I expect there will be very sharp questions from the district court judge, because she seems to have a very different interpretation of the Supreme Court's ruling than the Trump administration does. She viewed their order that the Trump administration, or that she could order them to facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's return, as them having to take steps to bring him back. The administration has clearly interpreted it otherwise. I think it's also important to note that in that ruling, the Supreme Court, all 9 justices, agreed on one thing in particular, that in these cases there needs to be judicial review. That's an opportunity for notice and a hearing, neither of which Mr. Abrego Garcia received before he was taken to El Salvador.
Well, there's the other high-profile legal battle that's over the case regarding Mr. Khalil. Tell us where that case is right now.
So, Reed, on Friday, an immigration judge in Louisiana determined that Mr. Khalil could be removed from the United States. Now, his lawyers have until April 23rd to seek another form of relief. That could be asylum, withholding of removal. They're also continuing to pursue their habeas case. That's the federal case in New Jersey, Reed, where they're still trying to argue for his release. Because one thing that the immigration judge said could not be debated in her court is the constitutionality of the statute that the government is using to deport Mr. Khalil. That's something that has to happen in federal court. So his lawyers are still trying to prevent this from happening on 2 fronts, both in the immigration court and in the federal court.
All right, so 2 updates on 2 cases. Let's tee up a third. The case in Vermont, another detainment case. That student that the Trump administration accused of being a Hamas supporter. What's going on in that case today?
Today, there was a hearing in that case that's for Ramesa Ozturk. And what her lawyers are arguing is, one, they want her released from this ICE detention center in Louisiana, where Mr. Khalil is also being held down there. They are also arguing that her arrest was unconstitutional, Reed. And a really important thing they're still trying to determine, which has been an issue in many of these cases, is jurisdiction. They want this case heard in Vermont. She was originally arrested in Massachusetts, brought to Vermont, and then taken to this detention center in Louisiana. So today in court, they were arguing that the proceedings should continue in Vermont and that she should be released from that detention center in Louisiana and allowed to go home. One thing her lawyers brought up in court is that it's very unusual for someone to be detained when their visa is being revoked, Reed. So they're arguing she should not have to spend any more time there.
All right, Katrina Kaufman, thank you so much for the updates on all of those cases. We appreciate it. All right, when we come back on CBS News 24/7, market reaction to some pretty big headlines. Chip maker NVIDIA said to be starting up production in the United States. Plus, Trump tariffs as we begin a new week. We'll see you in a minute. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. A new week on Wall Street and a new twist in the trade war with China. President Trump initially said he had taken electronics off of the list of those Chinese goods that were subject to a whopping 145% tariff. Now, that includes smartphones, computers, but then some more confusion when Mr. Trump later said this reprieve is only temporary. So let's check on market reaction right now. The Dow in positive territory, not up about 1%, but at least we're in positive territory. You know who else is watching this? CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. So what's the mood from investors starting a new week, Kelly?
Well, look, I think it's still more uncertainty, and you can see that in how the markets reacted today. I would say it's been choppy at best. You know, we opened pretty significantly in the green. The Dow was above 500 points at one point earlier in trading. That was driven pretty heavily by the tech stocks because of those exemptions that came through over the weekend. But then investors started to digest the reality that this isn't a complete exemption. You still have these tech products being subject to a 20% tariff from those original tariffs targeting fentanyl. And then the messaging has been a little bit inconsistent. And then you started to see the market get a little bit more choppy when the president was speaking this afternoon in the Balat. And he started to say, well, we might see tariffs on pharmaceutical products, on semiconductors in the future. And you start to see the market pull back a little bit, Reed. And so I think the one company today that has been solidly in the green is Apple, because that exemption, even if it is a 20% tariff on products coming from China, it's not 145%, right? And that was good news. So generally, I still think that what I'm hearing from investors is they're expecting more uncertainty, more choppiness. A lot of folks are trying to understand, you know, is this the bottom of the market? What I'm hearing from most people, Reed, is no.
All right, so these tech stops, you know, as you've taught me, really tend to be the muscle in the market, Kelly. I have to ask about NVIDIA because that's a major stock that we watch for every day. You have a headline about manufacturers of the world's leading chips market making that announcement, what, $500 billion manufacturing push in the United States. So fill in the details here for us.
Yeah, so this is a pretty big deal. NVIDIA announced a push to produce their AI supercomputers entirely in the U.S. for the first time. And so that was kind of the big headline that came out of their blog post this morning. A lot of the different pieces of the investment had already been announced. They kind of gave an update that their chips, their Blackwell chip, which is their sort of flagship chip that powers a lot of the AI development, has started production in a Phoenix plant. But really, this goes back to a broader push among these tech companies, Apple, of course, being another, to bring manufacturing here. What I do want to emphasize is even with this investment, it's not like 100% of NVIDIA's product is going to be made here. This is going to be something that takes a long time. But we did hear the White House touting this as a byproduct of these tariffs.
All right, so you also have some news about CEOs and whether they think we will see a recession and a specific timeline. What's going on there, Kelly?
So we got a new survey from Chief Executive. They take the temperature of CEOs in the business world, roughly over 300 or so every month. And last month, we saw 48% of them feel that there was going to be potentially a recession or at least an economic growth slowdown in the next 12 months. That jumped to 62% this month. And so this comes along with all of those headlines we talked about last week, Reed, where you had bank CEOs talking about the potential for a recession or at least a slowdown in economic growth. And so it does track with this larger feeling among consumers, investors, and businesses that there's a lot of uncertainty and concern about at least what the short-term impact could look like from tariffs, Reed.
Kelly O'Grady, thank you so much. It's good to see you on a Monday. All right, let's move on the map to New York, where the company involved in the deadly helicopter crash in the Hudson River shutting down operations, and they're doing it immediately. That is the word from the Federal Aviation Administration. This, of course, after a family of 5 died along with their pilot when the tour chopper went down near Lower Manhattan last Thursday. Well, the FAA launched a review of the tour company's license and safety record. Still no word on why that chopper went down, but the CEO says the company will help investigators and is grieving the tragic loss of life. Staying in New York, we are learning more about a small plane crash in New York State, killing 6. The crash happened Saturday, about 50 miles outside of Albany. The passengers were family members and partners going to a Passover celebration. No word yet on why that aircraft went down. Jury selection starts today in a retrial in Sarah Palin's libel lawsuit against the New York Times over a 2017 editorial. The former Republican vice presidential candidate and governor of Alaska claims the paper defamed her, falsely linking her campaign rhetoric to a mass shooting. The Times acknowledged the editorial was inaccurate, but said it quickly corrected that mistake. All right, we've got some major breaking news out of the state of California. An earthquake struck in the San Diego area. Our partners at CBS News Los Angeles picks up coverage from here.
We are going to continue covering this earthquake because, as Mark was telling us, initially it was said to be a 6.0, but it's been downgraded a little bit to a 5 point. What was that, Mark? 5 point?
Now, the U.S. Geological Survey is continuously updating it. They're calling it a 5.2. There's actually been a swarm through the area we can see now. This is Seismocam of our 5 sensors in Southern California: Anaheim, Long Beach, Los Angeles, San Bernardino, and San Diego. They all felt it. You can see that waveform there. 5.2 is certainly large enough to feel. Looking at the depth here is about 13 kilometers, so about 6-7 miles down. We're not seeing any information, though, about people reporting feeling it in the area, but that system is a self-reporting system. The U.S. Geological Survey maintains a portion of their site where you can voluntarily report to them whether or not you have felt this particular earthquake, and so far no one has reported it in yet, but that's not unusual, being that this has just happened. Let's see, they reported it at approximately 8 minutes past the hour. So we're looking at 10:15 now. So it's only about 7 minutes ago that this earthquake was reported. Again, this area is to the northeast. They call it a place called Julian, California, or San Diego Estates. We're getting some more data from the USGS about this. Again, there's a swarm of smaller earthquakes that appear to have happened also. If you can come out to my screen, you can see now the blue dot in the center, that's the 5.2 that was reported. And then there's the series of smaller ones, all about 2.5, 2.9 in the area. If I zoom out a little bit, you can see there's another one that was just reported here. Again, a 3.0. So a swarm of smaller earthquakes following one large one to the northeast. This is the city of San Diego here. If I can come up on my map, I got to set up my system here to be able to draw on it a little bit. And what you can see here, this is San Diego, and then the area of Julian is right about here. And if I zoom in again, you're going to see that this swarm all in this mountainous region. Now, there are homes in this area. You can see in this area here and over here, there are some small sort of areas where there are properties out there, but not a truly heavily populated area. But certainly, it's possible that people in the city of San Diego were able to feel this because the distance, I would estimate maybe that's 50, 80 miles away, guessing, looking at the map.
Yeah.
And Mark, I want to just interject just because I'm from there and I'm texting with my father actually, who's in San Diego right now. He's by
listening in to our CBS partners in Los Angeles who are bringing us that breaking news of a large earthquake hitting in the San Diego area. I can tell you just offline, a producer of ours from CBS in Los Angeles happened to be in San Diego and characterized what she felt as violent shaking. When we see it, you see it. And as soon as we get more information on that earthquake there in the San Diego area and then those other earthquakes that followed in the 3 and 4 range, we'll bring it to you. In the meantime, let's jump the map now to Nashville, where hundreds of protesters, they marched to the Tennessee State Capitol building to protest a proposed bill. So why are they up in arms? The bill would allow school districts to refuse enrollment for undocumented students. The bill would also allow schools to charge immigrant families for a public school education. So CBS News correspondent Nicole Valdez joins us from the center of those crowds. Okay, so Nicole, there's the proposed changes and then there's the reaction. Break down both for us, friend.
Yeah, hey, Reed, of course you can see there are about 100 people, if not more, here at a park just about a block away or so from the Tennessee State Capitol. They plan to start marching here shortly, really in opposition of this bill. So many have really spoken out against since its inception several months ago. I'll give you a little bit of a view here of what we're seeing because there are dozens of families here really just finding the words to describe a bill that so many really believe is controversial and in some cases discriminatory. Again, what this bill would do if passed is it would allow school districts to, first off, check the immigration status of students as they look to enroll into public schools. If they're not able to provide any sort of documentation that shows that they are either U.S. citizens or in the process of becoming U.S. citizens, the school district would have the option to either deny their enrollment or simply look to charge them tuition. Now, the Republicans who are in favor of this and many of the supporters of this bill, I'll pause right there because I know you can hear this crowd getting ready to march, and ahead of it here, leading that march, several children who are one of many speaking out against this bill. You'll notice that they're all wearing graduation caps. Just a statement here, right? Excuse me. Just a statement here to the opposition against this bill for so many families, minority families here in the state of Tennessee. So the Republicans who, again, are supportive of this bill say this is a cost-saving measure for the state to offer those school districts. They say that many of these school districts pay more in order to provide the necessary education for some of these students. However, of course, Democrats who oppose this feel like this is just really an argument about our immigration system that is being taken at the state level and at the school level. And there are many who have argued sort of its attempt here to try to challenge a 1982 Supreme Court ruling, Plyler versus Doe, that once really argued and gave students a right to education despite their immigration status. So as you see here, guys, we're getting ready to see this march just begin. Definitely a conversation that so many are trying to decide how to move forward with. This bill has already passed the state house, or rather the state senate here in Tennessee. Reed, we could see this enter the state house as soon as by the end of this month.
Does it look like the bill has the juice to get through the other body, the other legislative body there in the state of Tennessee? And then any early readout of how the governor, if this does pass through the House and Senate, how the governor will he veto it? Will he sign it? Any early readout of support?
Sure, this is a heavily Republican state. In fact, the House, I believe, has a supermajority, and so does the Senate. So you've got a lot of supporters of this bill who are either voting either on party lines or who genuinely support this bill. And of course, a Republican governor here. So I think the expectation is that if this passes the House, which could happen really any day now, and moves to the governor's desk, there's a likelihood that this bill would be signed into law here in the state of Tennessee. And once again, the argument and really the concern with, well, what does this do for that Supreme Court ruling, right? What comes of that ruling for states like this who decide to vote on measures that technically directly challenge that?
News in your communities, and Nicole Valdez bringing it to us from Tennessee. Good to see you. Thank you so much for that. All right, when we come back, a moment of pride for the CBS News family. Gail King launching into space. What an amazing story that is. We have that, plus word of a breaking news situation in San Diego. Very large earthquake. You're watching CBS News 24/7. We're back after the break.
Command engine start. 2, 1.
Well, a point of pride for all of us at CBS News as CBS Morning's Gail King rockets into space. There it is. Blue Origin's Shepard spacecraft lifted off this morning and carrying that all-female crew. Take a listen to Gail King just moments after stepping off of that capsule.
I can't even believe what I saw. When somebody calls this a ride, this was not a ride. What happened to us was not a ride. This was a bona fide friggin' flight. It's oddly quiet when you get up there. It's really quiet and peaceful. And you look down at the planet and you think, that's where we came from? And to me, it's such a reminder about how we need to do better, be better.
Love that. Do better, be better. All right, CBS News correspondent Karen Hua watched it live. Take us through the timeline in getting there.
Gosh, Reed, it was just such an emotional past few days, a journey, as Gail called it, all leading up to this moment. Let's start with that preparation. 2 days ago, those 6 female astronauts arrived here at the Blue Origin site where they began their training. They took a flight in a simulator where they learned how to board, learned to strap in, learned also what it would feel like to be in zero gravity. So they were prepared for what they would experience today. And today, that entire experience from launch to landing took just 10 minutes and 21 seconds. So they blasted off. We heard that sonic boom. All of us, the entire CBS News crew, watched it right here. We just saw it going up. And then when it was at the very top, we're told they experienced about 4 minutes of zero gravity where they were able to float around. Then that capsule parachuted back down to Earth. And that's when Katy Perry sang, "What a Wonderful World."
I love it. And, you know, Katy could have sang any of one of her own songs from her own catalog, but she said this was bigger than just about my music. And I love that. I also loved listening to Gail King saying, look, I don't like to be called an astronaut necessarily because she bows to the other women who are astronauts. But now they have the title, whether Gail likes it or not. And what are these astronauts saying about their journey?
Well, I think the really inspiring thing here is, you know, Gail said she didn't really feel like an astronaut, but this is a sign that really any woman, girl, or boy out there could eventually do this. That is the ultimate mission of companies like Blue Origin, is making spaceflight a little bit more accessible, like our planes right now. So their mission is to inspire folks and, you know, for Gail especially, to step outside her comfort zone.
Yes, it was so fun to watch. And, you know, the point about visibility here, it didn't hurt to have Oprah Winfrey there watching it, a couple of Kardashians watching it as well. So maybe, Karen, it'll be you next, Karen and the Kardashians. That's what we're going to vote for.
I'm not opposed.
Thank you so much.
Sign me up.
Lots of people saying before they wouldn't do it, now they're saying they would do it. I love that. That's the whole point of the whole thing. You know, a lot of people are calling this the dawn of space tourism, and a new industry at that. So let's talk about that part of the story with Franklin Institute Chief Astronomer and Planetarium Director Derek Pitts. Derek, it's good to see you there. Some high-profile people on board that flight. Like we talk about, Oprah was watching it from the ground. So were a couple of Kardashians. Do you think that that signals perhaps that there are going to be more high-profile people getting on these flights and opening up space tourism?
Thanks for having me this afternoon. I think what we're going to see going forward is that there are going to be more notable people that are taking these trips. You know, they are expensive. We can't dodge that bullet. But the fact of the matter is that now that the doors of space tourism are open, you know, as we can see from the crew that went today and the other previous crews that have gone, that this is something that can be done with a minimum of training and a minimum of experience, and it can be done safely so far. And that's a really good thing, because now we're opening the doors to low Earth orbit through commercial space flight organizations, and that's a good thing.
That is a good thing for sure, and exhilarating and exciting at that. Do you have confidence, though, that this will expand beyond the reach of just the rich and famous?
At some point, it will get to the point eventually, but that's going to be a long way off. As I said, this is an expensive trip right now. You know, for some, these trips can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so that's not easy for just anybody to come up with. But I'd say in a decade or more, it might get to the point where someone could use their life savings to make such a trip. A regular person.
A regular person. And just speaking to the significance of this, as somebody who has been in this industry, so to speak, for quite a while, and you've seen this recent evolution, you know, all things are relative, but this is a recent evolution. How do you feel?
Well, I think it's really interesting that what we're doing now is giving people an opportunity to sort of alter their consciousness about the planet they live on. And I think that this is going to affect everybody in the understanding that space is becoming more accessible. And that accessibility, hopefully, can change how we think about our planet, think about each other on the planet, and also give us a boost up, if you will, on the human exploration of the near space environment. So hopefully in another 20 years or so, we will be able to have regularly operated bases on the moon and be seriously thinking about a trip out to Mars, although that's a really daunting challenge.
Well, and you heard the wonder and awe of the people who got to hover above the planet. I love that old quote that says, "We protect what we love." These astronauts just now got another chapter in loving our beautiful planet. Nice to talk to somebody who watches it through a beautiful lens every day. Derek, have a great day.
Thanks for having me.
When we come back, we're going to be talking about a fire set deliberately at the governor's mansion in the state of Pennsylvania. What Governor Josh Shapiro has to say about that, plus what we're learning about the man who is accused of starting that fire. Moving on the map to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania now, where the man accused of setting the governor's mansion on fire is now in custody after telling police he harbored hatred towards Governor Josh Shapiro. And video to our monitors shows some of the damage left behind from that attack. This is what the governor and his family escaped. Look at that. They were woken up in the middle of the night by state troopers as the place burned. The family had just celebrated their first night of Passover. Shapiro spoke about the attack the day after it happened. Take a listen.
While my family and I were asleep upstairs here at the governor's residence, one of the state troopers assigned to our detail banged on our door, woke us up and told us we had an emergency and needed to leave immediately. Together, we secured all of our children, our 2 dogs, our family that was staying with us, and the troopers safely evacuated us from the governor's residence. Last night, we experienced an attack not just on our family, but on the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania here at the governor's residence.
CBS News correspondent Chanel calls. Chanel, the man accused here had hatred for the governor, so he says. So what more do we know about this suspect?
So, Reed, police say 38-year-old Cody Bomber jumped this fence behind me, broke into the governor's mansion and set a fire. And this apparently all happened really quickly within just minutes. And you mentioned this happened at 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. So the governor and his family were sleeping at the time. They were woken up by state police who were banging on their door, telling them they had to leave. Emergency crews then arrived. They were able to put out the fire. And I'll point out that it is still very much a crime scene here. There is police tape around the east side of this building this hour. So the investigation certainly continues. As for Bomber, the suspect in this case, he is facing some really serious charges. Terrorism, aggravated arson, and attempted homicide. Reed, at this point, police have not said whether they believe this was motivated by anything, whether it was motivated by religion or any political views. But in court filings, an affidavit that was released by police, that's where Bomber apparently told police that he was harboring hate for Governor Shapiro, even adding that he wanted to beat Shapiro with a hammer. For people that are just tuning into this story, we're just starting to learn more and piece things together. We now know that Cody Bomber did have a limited criminal history, and CBS News also spoke to his mother. And she had said that this is someone who was suffering from some mental health issues, that he was off his meds for some time before the attack happened. And she also said, Reed, that she was trying to get him some help. She says she reached out to police about 4 times in just the last week.
We also understand that you spoke to the fire chief today. As you look at that area and perhaps the fence around that perimeter, what did the fire chief have to say about the damage and also the security?
Well, he called this moment surreal. He said to see the governor's mansion here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, be firebombed, as he called it. He said that moment was surreal as the fire trucks pulled up and responded to the scene that night, early that morning on Sunday. He also called this an act of domestic terrorism. Listen.
The Molotov cocktail is no different than a gun, right? When I got that Molotov cocktail in my hand, I know at the end of the day, I'm going to create damage, destruction, and probably going through the terrorist's mind was, I want to kill somebody, right? So it's no different than that gun when I'm holding somebody up to steal their money, right? I know what the outcome could potentially be. And I think that's the surreal part of it, that there can be that much hatred pent up in somebody that they're able to take out that anger in such a way.
And Rita also spoke to state police today. They are saying now that Cody Bomber, the suspect in this case, is now receiving some health care in a hospital, so he will not be arraigned today. Likely when he's released from the hospital, that's when we'll see the arraignment take place, and then he'll eventually appear for a preliminary hearing in court.
All right, Chanel Call, thank you so much for that update. Okay, we want to get to some breaking news right now. Months after the shooting death of the United Healthcare CEO, there's a report surfacing on the Associated Press at that very area of United Healthcare's headquarters. A person has been arrested at United Healthcare headquarters after reports of an intruder. This is, of course, months after their CEO was gunned down. Police there in that Minneapolis suburb say the suspect was arrested there near that corporate campus. The police department there tweeting out that that arrest is confirmed. They say there's no threat to the public, but just sort of gives you a sense of the elevated tensions in regards to this specific campus and that specific company. So once again, a person has been arrested at the United Healthcare headquarters following reports of an intruder. CBS News 24/7 will continue watching this story throughout the day, what we can find out about the person arrested. All right, when we come back, we will be following more developments on Donald Trump's tariffs against China and the impacts of the markets, plus many other headlines from around the world. Video to our monitors takes us overseas now. Police in Denmark arrested 2 Chicago area college students after an Uber ride went wrong. So their parents are now doing everything in their power to get them back to the United States, but not without some legal roadblocks here. CBS News Chicago's Marissa Sulek reports.
At approximately 6 a.m. in the morning, I got a text from a foreign number saying, "Mom, I'm in prison in Copenhagen."
Sarah Buchan-Ray had 4 hours until she was supposed to pick up her 20-year-old son, Owen Ray, from O'Hare on March 31st. Now she's in a Copenhagen Airbnb doing anything she can to get him out of a Denmark prison. That's where he was put after he rode in an Uber with a friend.
When they got in the Uber, they realized the wrong address had been put in.
His mom says they asked to get out and ordered a new ride.
The Uber driver circled back around and found them walking and started yelling at them.
Buchan-Ray says this is all according to video played in a Danish court hearing this week. They say the Uber driver was yelling because Owen and his friend didn't pay. But receipts show they did.
The Uber driver first says he's going to call the police, and you can hear them saying, "We've done nothing wrong, call the police."
While they were waiting at the gates to board their planes to go home, they were arrested by the Danish police.
Jordan Finfer, Buchan-Ray's attorney out of Chicago, says Owen was arrested 6 hours later at the airport. He has not been charged or convicted, but Finfer says he was detained due to flight risk.
Is likely to be detained through the end of the month. He's never been charged.
They are in prison where they're locked up 23 hours a day.
Buchan-Ray says she gets to speak on the phone with Owen one day a week and visit him one day a week. Now they are waiting for a trial that should take place this month. But it's the years to come she is the most worried about for Owen.
And there are going to be ramifications from this. You know, when you're locked in a jail cell for 23 hours a day, you can't come out without nothing.
On the map in New York now, the company involved in the deadly helicopter crash on the Hudson River shutting down operations. They're doing it immediately. That is the word from the Federal Aviation Administration. This after a family of 5 died along with their pilot when the tour chopper went down near Lower Manhattan last Thursday. The FAA launched a review of the tour company's license and safety record. Still no word on what caused the crash. The CEO says the company will help investigators and is grieving the tragic loss of life. Staying in New York, we are learning more about a plane crash, a small plane crash in New York State that killed 6. The crash happened Saturday about 50 miles outside of Albany. The passengers were family members and partners going to a Passover celebration. So far, no word on why this plane went down. Jury selection starts today in a retrial in Sarah Palin's libel lawsuit against the New York Times over a Times 2017 editorial. Former Republican vice presidential candidate and governor of Alaska claims the paper defamed her, falsely linking her campaign rhetoric to a mass shooting. Times acknowledged the editorial was inaccurate, but said they quickly corrected the mistake. Let's take a live look at Cincinnati right now. A gray sky right there over some beautiful bridges in the Ohio Valley today. That's because a major storm system is headed that way. So meteorologist Jessica Birch is getting you prepared.
All right, let's take a look at all the states dealing with the severe weather, because right around the corner this afternoon, we're gearing up for scattered thunderstorms anywhere from South Dakota all the way over into Iowa. That's not them alone, though. I mean, we turn the page and we head just a little bit more forward of the storm system. Throughout the afternoon hours today, throughout the Ohio Valley from 4 to 8 p.m. tonight in those local time zones, we're gearing up for some severe weather. That slight risk starts to move its way over into West Virginia into the evening hours tonight, too. Here's what the timeline of the storm is going to look like. It's moving in from the north, so cold, dense air, thunderstorm activity, a potential for heavy rain at times, too, which means localized flooding is possible. But we're gearing up for snow, too, especially that lake effect snow that will sweep across the Great Lakes into the overnight hours tonight. This is just around 7 o'clock. We turn the page all the way into the early morning hours tomorrow. This becomes a lot more widespread throughout the Northeast. Lingering snowstorms are expected for us Wednesday in those early morning hours, all throughout upstate New York, northern portions of Ohio. It's the Ohio Valley that's going to be dealing with severe weather tonight. It's closer to D.C. into the overnight hours. That's when they're gearing up for that severe weather to kind of take the turn. Now, taking a look at the numbers and taking a look at what we can expect just into the coming days, that system will start to push offshore, but on the back end of it is more rain that will sweep across areas like Kansas City, all the way over into places like St. Louis as we head into the coming days. Anywhere up to around 4 inches of rain is expected from that system alone. You take a look widespread throughout the other states, closer to around 1 to 2 inches are expected from that snow system that's moving, or that storm system that's moving its way into the overnight hours tonight. And within the next 48 hours, those northern states, we're talking about northern parts of New York all the way up into Vermont and up into Maine, too. We could see anywhere up to around 3 inches of additional snow. I'll have more on that coming up in just a bit. Back to you.
All right, we are watching the White House right now, where you see the very large black SUV parked there outside the doors. That is about to carry the president of El Salvador, Bukele, after a pretty explosive meeting there at the White House. He was asked about a Maryland resident deported to a Salvadoran prison mistakenly by the United States. A lot of conversation about whether that man will be returned to the United States. Confidence pretty low after reporters asked the president and his Salvadoran counterpart about that. We're going to watch that as the news continues here on CBS News 24/7. Also, just want to button this up. An earthquake happening in Southern California, in the San Diego area. Not just one, but one big earthquake and several small earthquakes after that. So our partners at CBS News LA and our affiliate in San Diego watching that. You're watching CBS News 24/7. The news never stops, neither do we.